What we want to do is to introduce you to it so that you can kind of be thinking about it, praying about it, discussing it among yourselves, and seeing what you think about this thing, because this is something that we want to take our time with, that we want you to feel good about, and that this is something that the church wants to do as a group. So that's what it's all about. We just want to kind of introduce it to you today. Now, and my first person that I'm going to call on to kind of come is going to be Ann Harris. And I always like Ann to talk because she just makes everybody feel good about it. And she just has that knack about her. So I've called on her to come and just kind of tell you some of the things that's happened to get us to this point in time. And then Tim, our architect, will come and kind of go over the plan in detail. We'll put it up on the screen for you to look at, and I think you'll get a real blessing from that. And after that, we'll have Steve Ellis come and share his thoughts on this project, and then the pastor will wind things up. So, Ann, if you'll come now. Thank you.
How many of you can remember back to June of 2007? Well, let me refresh your memory, because if you're like me, I can hardly remember what happened yesterday, much less 2.5 years ago. Well, that was the date that we as a church body decided we needed more access to our church. We finally realized how really difficult it was for all of us as well as our visitors to get inside to worship. We looked around and saw how difficult it was to climb the stairs, these steep stairs right back here just to get into our sanctuary, or really how next to impossible it was to go down into the Sunday school area. So we started talking about needing also more parking. Parking that was closer to the entrances so that not only the elderly, but small families with children could get into our beautiful, beautiful church. Well, you appointed a task force, and you selected 13 members from various groups in our church, the deacon body, various Sunday schools areas, the choir, and you gave us this task of coming up with the possible solutions for access and for parking. Well, for several months, the members were assigned to contact different firms, not only in the state of Texas, but just different firms that was specialized in assisting churches with problems such as ours. Well, all this time, the Lord was working and constantly reminding all of us on the task force of what He had told us in Jeremiah 29:11, 12, and 13. For He said, I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. In those days when you pray, I will listen. You will hear me when you seek me, if you look for me in earnest. Now, people, believe me, this task force was looking for the Lord in earnest, because you as a church body had given us an overwhelming task. And to some extent, the task force had to make a few changes, because if you'll recall, Mark Bradshaw was our chairman. And, of course, due to his new job, he had to resign. And so we, as a task force, elected 2 co-chairmen. They were Leonard Underwood and John Widener. Well, it soon became evident, after talking with many, many people all over the state, that there was a man in Abilene, Texas, a very godly man, that diligently sought God's assistance and His direction in everything that he did. And believe it or not, he had a tremendous successful project, so similar to ours, with the First Baptist Church in Abilene. And that man was Tim Rice McClarty, architect. So, in November 2007, Tim came to our church and to primarily give us suggestions on, guess what? Parking and accessibility. Because, remember, that's what you had asked us to do. Well, in a letter from Tim to the task force on November the 29th, 2007, and I quote, your church is going to grow. God has already made that decision. It is your responsibility to assist God. And years ago, A congregation made up of people with a vision for the future went out on faith and built a facility that was well beyond their means. They made a step for future generations, end of quote. But when the task force started closely looking at our buildings, there were many other areas that needed attention before we could even address accessibility and parking. So, what did we do? We came back to you. And you had the solution. Remember our dream sessions? Wasn't that neat? Everybody sat down and we wrote down all of our wish list for First Baptist. Some of you wanted a new kitchen. Some of you thought we needed to redo the brick. We had a lady on the task force by the name of Pam Blake that, bless her heart, took all of those wish lists from every one of you and compiled them into a 28-page volume of what you wanted to be done at First Baptist. Well, it was really great reading. I loved it. And we would sit down in meetings and see what some of you wanted. Some of you wanted a new elevator that didn't stop in between floors, so you'd have to pull Ms. Moore out of the elevator. Some of you wanted, just various things. But we took all of those and we looked at them and came back to you in the early months of 2008 and said, we'll do two things. We'll either stick to your original request, which was just to do accessibility and parking, or we would look at all the constructional needs of this gorgeous building. Well, guess what you told us to do? You said, look at everything. We don't want to stick with just accessibility and parking. It's open to you all. See what you can come up with. Well, we sat down and did priorities. We did 7 or 8 various groups and even called on some of you all to serve on these. You're fixing to go to work because some of you were asked to be with kitchen with Leonard. Some of you were to plan new offices for the back area. Some of you were to serve on a decorating committee. Like I say, the plans are in the final state, and you're fixing to go to work. But let me get back to these past 3 months. Every time that Tim has come, he has come with these phenomenal ways to revitalize this marvelous house of God with a vision for the future. But you know, when he came several weeks ago and brought the drawings you're going to see today, I couldn't help but remember a statement that was made in so many of our meetings. And it says, this building project is just part of the plan that God has made for your church. God has placed people in our paths. He's provided ways to you to express the desires for your church. He's given us a new interim pastor. How on earth could we have started a building project without a pastor? I don't think that would have been possible. So what did God do? He gave us Charlie. All right, and did you know that a new prayer group has been started every Wednesday night at 5:30? A group sits right back there, and do you know what they do? For 30 minutes, they pray for this church. They pray for the various committees. They pray for those that are sick. But they pray for this task force, for us, the search committee, for the various areas that this church needs. They go to the Lord in prayer specifically. And you know, God has told us that his house is to be a house of prayer. And now more than ever, we see what God can do at First Baptist Church Brownwood through prayer. I know without a doubt when you see what God has done through his servants today, that you will be convinced that through his mighty, mighty power at work within us, he is able to do far more than we could ever dare to ask or even dream of. Infinitely beyond our highest prayers, desires, thoughts, or hopes. Tim, come talk to these marvelous people.